Easy guys, welcome back to the lab. Fellow scientists, you join me today for another experiment. Today we test whether intelligence can survive poverty and whether wealth can survive incompetence. The experiment takes place in WorldBox, a god simulator sandbox with a long history of ethical oversights. Our world is divided in half. Fertility on one side, scarcity on the other. An unbreakable wall ensures no interaction from either side until the experiment is compromised. The fertile side receives food, materials, and the finest resources. Forests regenerate, lakes replenish, mistakes are absorbed by abundance. The barren side receives sand, wildlife that resents their existence, and few opportunities to learn from the consequences. To survive in this wasteland of bone and dust, our humans will have to be smart. So to compensate, we adjusted the genome. Intelligence is maximized. Every baby is born with both genius and wise traits, as well as hyperintelligence. Everything else is left untouched for fairness. Within our smart culture, knowledge is celebrated above all else. On the fertile side, intelligence has been removed from the genome entirely, and all are born with the stupid trait. In its place, a culture of inheritance, legacy, and the comforting belief that resources solve everything. Over the next 250 years, we will observe. We have a goal. It's just wrong. On the left, Unwise Village was formed with 10 citizens. On the right, Smart Kingdom, also with 10. Over the next 250 years, we observe how these civilizations develop under unequal conditions. With an abundance of food, it's not long before Unwise Village begins to grow. New children are born. And not long after that, there's a tent, then a campfire, and storage buildings already starting to fill with berries and food. On the other side, citizens spread out across the heat and the dust looking for something to eat, while roads and the first pieces of infrastructure begin to take shape behind them. By year 5, Unwise Village is already moving ahead. Their first house is finished, life through food. A strong stockpile of metals is already beginning to take shape in their stores. Smart Kingdom, meanwhile, sits at 11 citizens, held back by a lack of a reliable food source. In year 6, we finally see some adaptation. Smart Kingdom establishes its first wheat farm, securing themselves a constant supply of bread. Something we still haven't seen from the Unwise, who've had no need to change while fruit bushes remain abundant all around them. By year 12, Smart Kingdom has grown to 21 citizens, but Unwise Village leads with 35, now having followed suit with a farm of its own. Next, the smart villagers construct a town hall, which allows them to begin upgrading other buildings and quietly supports further population growth. Nearby, the beginnings of a mine appear, offering access to stone, iron, and gold. Smart Kingdom also begins forming an army. 2 soldiers patrol the western edge of town. The Unwise still have no standing military, yet their population advantage remains 10 civilians ahead. At this stage, population growth and territorial expansion favored abundance, while military organization appeared earlier among the smart. Total resources still sat firmly in the Unwise Village's favor, supported by a wider variety of available foods. It wasn't long before their first soldiers appeared, led by a young Mark Zuckerberg. On the poorer side, Richard Kepler led the smart army, unable to afford anything more than a stone sword. The lack of resources here may yet stifle the Smart Kingdom's ability to craft fine weapons in the years to come. The asymmetry at this point was not intelligence, but access to raw materials. They would have to close the gap quickly. By year 19, Unwise Village experienced a population surge, opening a 30% lead over Smart Kingdom. Their abundance was paying off, and their standing army was beginning to pull ahead as well. Meanwhile, Richard Kepler and his army fought to protect the surrounding lands from the wild buffalo. This carried an unexpected benefit. Each encounter built experience, improving their soldiers' future efficiency in battle. And the meat gained helped feed the population, provided losses were kept low, of course. The smart now had their mine up and running, something we had yet to see from the Unwise Village. Even so, this did little to slow the wealthy, whose population and military strength continued to grow. The unwise established a new settlement, Apple, out on the frontier, likely positioned to take advantage of richer ore density further to the south. To make the two factions easier to distinguish, I'll mark Smart in green from this point forward. By year 25, King Bareem, first of his name, leader of the rich and monarch of the unwise, was killed by a dog. Long live Mark Cook, the new king. May he lead the stupid to new pastures. It would be 5 years before the Smart Kingdom founded a second settlement. Calculus, just a stone's throw from Apple on the other side of the Great Wall. Despite this, the unwise maintained their 30% population lead. The Smart settlements would need to proceed carefully. Its population was small, and wild rhino grazed to the south. A stronger foothold would be necessary if it was to survive. Up in Smart Kingdom, the army remained smaller, but individual unit levels ranged between 3 and 5. Experience had accumulated, perhaps aided by intelligence and cultural traits. This would make them more effective in combat. The army of wealth and stupidity, by contrast, remained largely inexperienced, with most units still at level 1. At this point, skill and experience had diverged from the size of their armies. In the lush woodland to the west, Apple continued to grow, gaining access to a farm of its own. Calculus, by contrast, was still struggling to find its footing. The unwise established a third settlement, Meta, positioned close to rich veins of silver and mithril. The wealthy continued to expand outward, adding further settlements to the edge of their kingdom. In the south, the entire Smart army was brought to bear as 2 wild buffalo moved north. The fighting added a small amount of meat to Smart Kingdom stockpiles, a welcome change from their usual diet of bread and pies. By year 44, the rich had pulled further ahead. Unwise Village held a marginal population lead and a slightly larger army, and this advantage was no longer limited to the capital alone. By year 50, Calculus finally established a farm, providing a more reliable food supply. Hopefully their population would begin to climb as a result. King Alila, approaching his 70th birthday, appeared largely unaware of the danger beyond the wall, and was often seen napping in the sand. At least King Mark Cook had a house to sleep in. By year 60, the wealthy but dim had founded a 4th colony. Wild dogs lived peacefully in the woodland. The rich, however, remained uneasy, still scarred by the death of their former king, who had been killed by a dog. No battle was recorded. From this tension emerged Subject Woof, a young pup indigenous to the fertile forest. Woof spent his days singing, moving freely through the trees and living in balance with nature alongside the rest of his people, whose settlement happened to sit atop a rich supply of adamantine. Meanwhile, to the east, Smart Kingdom founded a 4th colony, Radioactivity, an unfortunate name for a place intended to support long-term habitation. Dangerous wild creatures continued to graze to the south, and for new colonies the danger remained constant. Radioactivity already appeared close to abandonment. Its 2 inhabitants were nowhere to be seen. Meanwhile, to the south of the fertile lands, Woof and his people continued their lives within the forest. They played, they sang, and they remained wary of the wealthy humans to the north, who were steadily advancing southward, harvesting everything in their path. In response, Woof's people sent scouts north in an attempt at peaceful deterrence. The message was simple: stop destroying the forest, leave the land intact. The humans declined. One of the scouts, a peacekeeper named Woof, was killed and processed for meat. Subject Woof returned north to recover his friend's remains, intending to bring them back to the forest. This plan was not well received. He was chased away. Woof fled south, attempting to lose the humans among the trees. It was his only available hope. Subject Woof was terminated. Apologies, an external force has briefly invaded the experiment. Several dogs are now on fire. Rain followed. Meanwhile, Calculus had grown to a population of 115 and fielded a standing army of 15. Apple's army was already twice that size. King Alila turned his attention to writing a new book, one intended to grant bonuses to the citizens of his kingdom. It would need to be a good book. Smart Kingdom produced 3 new texts on mathematics and diplomacy, increasing experience and intelligence among those who read them. Not long after, the wealthy founded a fourth town, Microslop, built beside a rich supply of adamantine, granting the town early access to high-tier armor and weapons. Over the following decade, Smart Kingdom's population began to close the gap with Unwise Village, although their army size continued to lag behind. By year 94, a new city, Envidia, formed at the southern edge of the fertile lands. At this point, the rich now controlled 7 cities in total. Smart had only just established their third, with entropy beginning to take shape. Their smaller army frequently struggled against the wasteland, clashing with hostile rhinos and buffalo. At times, it was difficult to determine whom was hunting whom. Once again, the difference lay in experience. Individual soldiers in the Smart army had reached levels 7, 8, and 9, while their unwise counterparts remained far less seasoned. This might shape the results to come. By year 112, much of the southern wastelands remained uninhabited by the Smart. A new settlement did appear. Superconductivity was founded, although it immediately struggled against the conditions of the Barrens. By year 120, the smallest cities' entropy, enlightenment, and superconductivity were holding on, but only just. Population growth remained limited. Survival was possible, expansion was not. As the years passed, the constraints on the Smart became increasingly clear. At this stage, intelligence lacked scale, surplus resources, and numerical parity with the stupid. Both entropy and enlightenment eventually established farms, offering a degree of stability. King Cook, the great leader of the wealthy yet stupid, spent his time socializing with his subordinates as the kingdom continued to run itself. At 130 years old, he was... Mark? Well, he was dead. A minor inconvenience. A new king was selected. All hail Elon Huang of the rich. By year 145, Smart Kingdom had been dwarfed. Even the later settlements of the stupid now fielded larger armies than the Smart capital itself. The gap persisted. Over the years, the kingdom of the rich cycled between monarchs at a steady pace. Kings lived, ruled briefly and died, only to be replaced again. Smart Kingdom, by contrast, was now on its third ruler, Leonard Einstein, comparatively youthful at the sprightly age of 69, remained in power while the wealthy continued their rapid succession. By the year 180, the Smart appeared to be making progress. Resource stability may have reduced some of the environmental pressure they had faced for much of their history. By year 200, the gap showed signs of narrowing. Even so, the combined armies of the unwise still outweighed those of the Smart. By year 225, little had changed. Smart Kingdom had grown enough to hold a slight army advantage over Apple. Beyond that, the disparity remained. The rich kingdom fielded an army of roughly 1,000 soldiers and supported a population of 2,000. The Smart army numbered closer to 750, with a population smaller by a similar margin. What the Smart lacked in scale, they compensated for in experience. Their soldiers were, on average, more skilled. But it was time to find out. At this point, the experiment required resolution. The Great Wall was removed, and the two civilizations collided. Apple's army moved east, advancing towards Calculus, 190 strong, with the full weight of the unwise forces close behind. To the south, the armies of Microslop, Amazon, and Nvidia gathered and combined, while Meta's forces stalled on the far side of the lake, unable to commit. The northern front ignited first. The armies of Calculus shaped the desert itself into a defense, forming barriers from cactus and terrain. Apple's assault failed to break through, losing nearly 20% of its force in the attempt. They withdrew, regrouped, and merged with the main unwise army before redirecting their advance towards Smart Kingdom. To the south, Microslop and superconductivity collided as Smart forces crossed the border. Nvidia raised its banners, assembled its troops, and began marching east to join the fight. To the north, Unwise Village and Smart Kingdom finally clashed. The Smart held their ground as fire swept through the ranks. This proved inconvenient, but not decisive. Smart Kingdom sustained limited losses. Apple, leading the unwise assault, came close to collapse. Calculus had also paid heavily on the front lines, losing nearly half its army. Yet the border held as unwise forces continued to press forward. Smaller, smart detachments attempted to exploit the chaos. Pushing southwest towards Apple, these units were intercepted and destroyed. The Smart Kingdom had now lost a third of its total forces. The Unwise had suffered heavily as well, with Apple absorbing the worst of it. The remaining armies met again. Apple, already weakened, was overrun by the surviving Smart forces, despite those forces having lost nearly 75% of their original strength. In the south, Amazon, Nvidia, and Microslop together lost more than 300 troops. Their cities were left exposed. What remained of the Smart army, 120 strong, turned south and took Microslop. Apple fell soon after in the north. Amazon Prime fell next. Meta was last. The invading Smart armies regrouped. They moved around the lake and closed in. One city remained. Unwise Village prepared its defense. A small force, led by Doug Huang, held the city long enough to mount a final push south against the Smart army. Outnumbered, the wealthy fell. The war lasted 5 years, and the Smart lost over half their army. 400 soldiers were gone. The Unwise began with 950. None remained. The outcome was decided not by wealth, but by the skill of those who survived long enough to fight. This concludes the experiment. The hypothesis survived. The subjects did not.